Starfield could be Xbox's greatest success. Let's talk about why. So I think the reason that Starfield could be such a good success for Xbox is because we've broken down to three separate categories: size, scope, and story. We'll also be going over three reasons why Starfield could be Xbox's greatest failure: technical performance, glitches, and monetization. With that being said, guys, remember to subscribe and let's get right into it. So you've all heard rumours about the size of Starfield. 1,000 planets, many of them habited by people, some civilizations, hundreds of procedurally generated planets and all the rest. You've heard all of that. But what's truly impressive about Starfield is the way that, unlike No Man's Sky where you have all these planets and nothing in them, these planets in Starfield actually look like they have genuine potential for gameplay. And I'm a big fan of No Man's Sky. I think that if Bethesda keep it realistic and don't let the sheer size of the game overwhelm them, they could keep the game interesting enough on all of those different planets if they put enough effort into the procedural generation, that those planets won't become boring. And that's a key point here. The success of Starfield relies on the consistency of its content, not just the sheer size of the content. Because we've all seen games before that are massive and expansive, but never have we seen one that uses procedural generation to such an effect that allows us to have worlds that are full and interesting almost all the time. Obviously it's not possible all the time with 1,000 planets, but the key here will be consistency and how much of that content Bethesda can keep consistently interesting. There's also the sheer magnitude of space, but it's what you can do in it that I think will really make a difference as to why Starfield could be such a massive success for both Xbox and Bethesda. Scope for me is the most important reason as to why Starfield could be Xbox's greatest success. We've all seen the trailers, we all know how much this game promises, but can it deliver? That's the real question. And I'm not talking half-heartedly deliver on some of them, having some systems half-baked and some in the game. These systems, if they come out fully realised, exactly as we hope they do, this could be the most feature-rich game ever released. Look at space, for example. Not only can you travel to different planets, can you train with people in space, can you dogfight in space as well, but you can actually board other people's ships and steal what's on their ship, and those instances will remain exactly where you put them. Look at the Starfield trailer. Did you see where that player kept their sandwiches in exactly the same place and none of them moved? They just built this massive pile of sandwiches. It's little things like this that make Starfield such an absolute wonder to so many players. I think it will be incredibly interesting to see how many people are satisfied with what Starfield offers when it releases. Also, the many layered tier system of abilities will also be interesting to see as well, because there is a skill tree in Starfield, as well as a massive selection of weapons and other things too that you can collect for your character and your ship. Ship customization is another massive one as well. If Bethesda can give the player as much choice as it's suggesting it can, this won't just be one of the big successes for Xbox and Bethesda, this will be one of the greatest games ever released. Of course, the real success of any Bethesda game will always come down to, and still does come down to, the story. Morrowind, Oblivion, Skyrim, Fallout. What do all those games have in common? Because it sure isn't the most advanced gameplay in the world. It's story, and it always will be story. Bethesda games are like no other because of what they can deliver in the narrative department, and how immersed they make the player in that narrative. Starfield's success hinges on just how good they are at making the player feel immersed in that story. There's never been a chance for Bethesda to prove their ability more than here, and after the disappointments of Redfall, check out my video on that by the way, and Fallout 76, there has never been a time that Bethesda needs a win more than right here. This is exactly where Bethesda is strongest, and so it's exactly where Bethesda needs to succeed most to make Starfield appealing to even the most casual of Bethesda fans. It's that I think that's the most important. Starfield is not just a big game, it's a moment in time. Look on Twitter, or X, whatever you want to call it. There's discourse about Starfield coming from everywhere. PlayStation fans, Xbox fans, PC gamers wondering if they can run it. This is a moment in time for gaming. It's the biggest release of possibly the last decade. I think everyone, including me, is incredibly excited to see exactly what Bethesda can offer. Apparently it's been 8 years in development, so we'll see just how many of those 8 years has paid off. And talking about paying off, let's move to 3 reasons that Starfield could be Xbox's biggest disaster. And that's saying something considering we've just seen Redfall. What hindered Redfall more than anything else possibly could have? It was the glitches. Redfall felt half finished and half baked on every single level. It felt like a game with very little effort pushed into it, and a game that was shoved out of the door purely for Game Pass's sake. And I'm not saying Game Pass is a bad thing, because Game Pass is the best deal in gaming, and it's the best deal that will probably ever be in gaming. But my point is, Starfield cannot afford to do the same. Not now that we've already seen the consequences of when that happens. Starfield needs to not only have very few glitches, but it needs to be technically sound. And that's a real problem. Let's be honest, Bethesda doesn't exactly have the biggest reputation for releasing games in technically sound, glitch-free states. Whole careers were made out of the tragedy that was Fallout 76, and Fallout 4 wasn't perfect either, not by any stretch, nor has any Bethesda game been. Starfield, with its extended development time and promises from its developers, needs to sit in that sweet spot of, okay, we're not expecting it to be perfect, but it needs to at least be acceptable. And obviously that sounds like a low bar, but by acceptable, I mean it needs to be good. Because we can't keep holding Bethesda games at a lower standpoint than we do other games merely because of the story. Games nowadays are so advanced that teams should take the time to delay release dates and work on stability, exactly as Bethesda's done here. Obviously not all studios can afford to do that, but if you can, you should. And I think it'll be interesting to see whether it's worked here with Starfield. Anyway, let's go on to the last sticking point of Starfield's success: monetization. And so we've arrived at what could possibly be the biggest spanner in the works for Starfield: monetization. Bethesda, historically anyway, do not have the best track record at monetizing their games fairly for consumers. Look at Fallout 76. It released Feature Bare, and then released a paid subscription model that fixed some of its issues. That can't be the norm here with Starfield. If it's released Feature Bare, there will be very few people there to defend it, because the hype for Starfield is approaching Cyberpunk 2077 levels. That's how many expectations there are in this game. And I think that this is not only the biggest game that could possibly be released for Bethesda, but the most important one for Xbox as well. This is what could be considered a system seller, and Xbox has been in dire need of system sellers ever since the Series X released. Sure, Game Pass is a system seller almost on its own, but you really at some point need exclusive games that can really show that Game Pass is a subscription model worth following. Sony have done that repeatedly with the PS5, albeit at a much slower rate than in the PS4 days, but now it's really time for Xbox to shine. Exclusive games, well, people may not like to admit it, are what keep the console world turning. There's only so much time that Xbox can continue relying on the promise of Game Pass to sell their systems. There is time for an exclusive, and that time is now. Starfield's review embargo is today, so let's hope the reviews come back positive, because these reviews are paramount to exactly how successful Starfield will be. I'll be covering Starfield from almost the moment of its release, so if you're excited for that, be sure to subscribe, check out my other videos, and make sure you have a good day. In a bit.